guys, it's Dave again from GuitarBreakdown.com, and today we're going to break down an Andy Wood chord melody. This might be a departure from what you're used to on our channel. I know a lot of the stuff we do is guitar solos and licks and break those things down and everything, but this is something we're going to do a lot more of in the future. We've had a lot of requests for chord melody stuff or harmony lessons. When I did the Alan Holdsworth solo breakdown, we had a lot of requests for lessons on chords and voicings and all that kind of stuff, of course, because Alan Holdsworth is pretty well known for his crazy chord voicings. But this is, I think this is a great introduction to chord melody stuff if you're not familiar with it, because it's pretty straightforward. It's the familiar blues progression with a cool melody that you're familiar with. The melody is from I think it's either called Georgia or Georgia on My Mind. I'm terrible with names, but I'm sure you know this once you hear it. And this is basically a video that was uploaded about a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, by Andy Wood. He was testing out his new Badger, Sir Badger amp with his guitar and just testing out a bunch of tones that he can get with it. And he threw in this little chord melody. And I remember when I first heard it, I immediately learned it, and now I want to show you guys because I think it is a great little chord melody that's not too complicated, because it's basically just chords and the melody, which essentially is what a chord melody is. But it doesn't have any crazy walking bass lines or any crazy chord voicings or anything like that. If you're not familiar with if you're not familiar with the chord melody stuff, take a look at like Andy McGee or Tuck and Drace. Those guys are two of my favorite solo chord melody guys. And they're some of the best. I mean, they do some really intricate walking bass lines with crazy chord voicings, and they alter the melodies slightly so they still sound recognizable and familiar, but they just sound cooler, sort of. But also, if you're not familiar with this kind of stuff, you might want to start checking out some classical music. Like a lot of people start out with like Greensleeves or something like that, because that really introduces you to again, working with a bass line against a melody and filling in the holes of the chord with the voicings and all that kind of stuff. It also is great to introduce you to like parallel motion, contrary motion, relative motion, all that kind of stuff. And it just opens up your world in a new direction, because I know a lot of people get stuck into the rut of they're so into solos and learning arpeggios and licks and all phrasing and all this kind of stuff. But this goes kind of hand in hand with all that, because when you learn more of this, it really helps out your soloing, and you'll see that. And it's also really fun because harmonically it's just it's really pleasing to your ear just hearing all this going on as opposed to just running licks and stuff. So anyway, check out those guys. And again, this is a pretty simple chord melody. I kind of elaborate a little bit on some of the voicings at the end, and we'll go over that kind of thing. And I put in a few different little touches of my own, I guess, little slides and stuff that I thought were cool. So we'll go over both what he did and some of the little things that I did, and I hope you'd enjoy this. And if you have any other requests for anything specific, just let us know, and we will get into that. But I hope you enjoy this lesson, and we'll get started now. Thanks. Alright, so before we get started, if you click the link below, as always, it will bring you to the video that this lesson is based on. And there's also a time code that will tell you where it all begins, kind of thing. If you're... Again, we're going to talk more about chord melodies. We're actually going to dive into this pretty in-depth in future lessons. But this lesson is more or less just introducing you to the whole technique and what it is, and it's a great little composition of this song kind of thing. At least I thought it was. So I'm not going to break down, like, what we will discuss in the chord melody lessons is basically how to start out with a melody and really understand what's going on in the melody. Then introduce like a walking bass line and put those two together, and then start talking about chord voicings and how to fill the holes in and all that kind of stuff. This is basically just going to show you straight ahead what's going on, but I would suggest on your own to actually break this down where you just learn the melody note, which means just learning the single note, the highest note basically. in this whole thing, and then work on what the bass is doing. So you just figure out of all the chords, what's the lowest note doing in all the movement, and then figure out the chord voicings. And we'll break down some of the chord voicings here and stuff so you could understand a little bit of what's going on. But I really just wanted to get maybe your fingers moving in this kind of direction and get you acquainted with what's going on. So you can put your pick down because that will not be of any use in this. It's going to be all kind of finger picking kind of thing. If you want to use the pick, you can. You can strum it or figure out a way to use the pick and hybrid picking and stuff. But for this kind of stuff, I usually don't use a pick at all. Anyway, to start this out, it's based in the key of F major, and the first chord and first two chords are basically an F major 7 chord, but it's in this inversion up here. If you're not familiar with that, that's the first finger on the 3rd fret of the D string, and the 3rd finger can basically bar the 5th fret of the G, B, and E string. Now, what he does, and a lot of people do, basically, this is, he does kind of like an Eric Johnson-y kind of thing, where he doesn't play the full chord, he's skipping strings and suggesting the intervals of the voicing of the chord. And that's what he does here. Instead of playing that whole barred G, B, and E string, he doesn't actually play that B string. So he's only playing these 3 notes instead of... So you get this voicing. And what that is, it's the root, the 5th. Now, if you barred this whole thing, it would be the root, the 5th, the major 7, and the major 3rd, which gives you that major 7th chord. But right now, he's playing the root, the 5th, and the major 3rd. So this could be really... I mean, it could be a dominant 7 chord, it could be a major 7 chord with that major 3rd in there, but you don't really know what the 7th is because you're not hearing it. But in all intents and purposes, it's the 1 chord of this thing, so it's probably, a major 7. You can analyze these things a million different ways. Anyway, so that's the first voicing, and the second voicing is that. And that's basically the first finger on the 7th fret of the D string, the 3rd finger on the 9th fret of the G string. You skip the B string and you play the first finger, or the 2nd finger, I'm sorry, on the 8th fret of the E string. Again, I'm not sure if I said those fingers right, but it was the first finger on the 7th fret D string, 3rd finger on the 9th fret of the G string, and 2nd finger on the 8th fret of the E string. And again, you're skipping the B string. So the first 2 chords are... And those are basically just different inversions of a major 7 chord, because now he moved basically from this root all the way up to here, which is the major 3rd of the chord, and then here you have the major 7. So you have the root, or the major 3rd, the major 7, and then you have the 5th. Okay, so those are those 2 inversions right there. Now you could fill in this chord with either your pinky on the 10th fret of the B string, and that would basically give you another root note. I'm sorry, that would give you another major 3rd. Or you can move down and play this 8th fret on the B string, which would give you a 9th on there. So this would be over B. This would be a major 9 chord. If you had this over A, that would be a minor sound. That would be obviously a minor, an A minor 7 chord. So again, all these voicings that you learn can be used over different bass notes, and we're going to get into that in another lesson where I'm going to break down a Don Mock thing where he taught in this this book that he put out a long time ago. It was called 10. It was at the at GIT, the school in Hollywood, back in the 80s, I think, maybe the late 70s, early 80s. He put out a book called, or GIT put out a book called 10. and it was 10 great artists like Robin Ford. I forget who everybody was in there, but I know Robin Ford was in there. Howard Roberts, the founder of GIT, was in there. One of the founders, or maybe the founder. And Don Mock was in there. And there's all Steve Trovato might have been in there also. Anyway, long story short, he goes over this thing where it's basically major triads with different bass notes, and it's a song that he put together, and it's just really cool. So, but it's analyzing triads over different bass notes, and it's really cool, and I'm looking forward to that lesson. I think I'm going to do that in the next 2 or 3 lessons, actually. But so this is the same thing. You can analyze this chord right here over an A, and it's an A minor sound. If you analyze this over F, it's an F major 9 sound. So, but in this instance, again, if you're thinking of F major, we got this inversion and this inversion, all of the same chord over F. So, and you can add a little vibrato by shaking your hand back and forth, a very classical thing to do.